Hello, I'm Nathalie Dupree. On today's show, I've got an elegant menu that's bursting with flavors. It's a little expensive. However, there are a couple of substitutions that will change the price, but not the character. What I wanted in the book was an unusual mussel dish, and one with no garlic, because every once in a while I get complaints about garlic. And normally you get marinara that has garlic in mussels. This was my friend Julia Martin's recipe, and she's allergic to them. To clean mussels, get a sink full of water, lukewarm water, and stiffly scrub each one with a nice stiff brush like this. Just, in fact, even a slightly stiffer one than this one. And then if you're serving in the shell, you need to scrape off the barnacles and any beard that it might have. These are pretty clean mussels, but they do have a little beard here that I'm just pulling off. And here's another little beard. You just want to get rid of that so that people don't have it. But you may not see anything that look like a beard, and if you don't see it, there isn't one, so don't start looking for it. And then pull the scooped out shells out of the water. Don't tip them out, because you don't want to get the gritty water into your clean shells. You can store them a week or so in the refrigerator if you wrap them in wet newspaper and keep them on the bottom shrink. They'll shrink. They'll be alive, but they'll shrink because they're not getting anything to eat. Meanwhile, here, let me heat up 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a large pan, and I'm going to chop this onion while it's heating up. I'll just show you very quickly how to do that. Cut your onion in half, put the flat side down from you so you don't cry, and peel the onion. Lady wrote me recently and wanted to know why I showed so many onions. Did I think you all were dumb? No, I don't think you're dumb. But there are a lot of people out there who still tell me that they didn't know how to chop an onion until they started watching the show. So I feel like I have to do it every show or so. Cut into the roots like that. You know, I don't think there are any dumb things to learn about cooking, and I don't think there's such a thing as a dumb question. So let's go ahead now and then cut in. You cut into the roots like I did, and then just down like that, and it's done. You cook it until it's transparent. There are all those magical words for it: light and transparent, soft and transparent, translucent. But any of them will do. You just want to get them soft, and you have to do that before you add the acid, or they just never seem to get sauce. Then you add about a 1/4 cup of Dijon mustard, and 1 1/3 cups of non-alcoholic wine, or you could use what they call cooking wine, or you could even use grape juice. I just don't cook with alcohol on the show at all, as many of you have probably realized, because I have so many wonderful people watching it, including some 6-year-olds and some 8-year-olds who don't drink and probably aren't comfortable using wine. So I don't use any, but I found a lot of non-alcoholic substitutes that I think are just great. You can use chicken broth with lemon juice even if you wanted to. Now you bring this to a boil, and then you add 2 pounds of mussels and 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley. Now there you are. Then you just cover it, turn down the heat, and steam it until they're open, about 6 minutes. And here they are like magic, maybe 8 minutes, 6 to 8, depends. And then you just serve them with a nice crusty bread. Gosh, are they terrific. And I many times just serve them right in that lovely paella pan. It's great. Now, over here I have some charred peppers, and these are one of my favorites. And I'm going to do this real fast for you. Just take and cut a pepper and core it and seed it. That means just remove the core and the seeds and cut it into wedges, into chunks. And heat a couple of tablespoons of oil in a pan in a large skillet. Add the peppers and stir fry them until they're well charred. And by stir fried, I mean just toss them occasionally like this. Now, I like these charred black things. So here they are. And then, meanwhile, you mix 1½ tablespoons of light soy sauce, 1 to 2 teaspoons of Tabasco, a tablespoon of red or wine vinegar, and a teaspoon of sugar. Don't tell anybody about the sugar. And just pour that all into the peppers, stir it in. I probably should have just put them all in individually. It would have gone a little better. And you just cook it till it's all absorbed. And then put them in the serving dish that you want it for. And we have them in a real pretty one. In fact, I've got it right here. Let me just show you that then. And sprinkle it with a tablespoon of sesame seeds. You can serve it at room temperature, or you can refrigerate it, or you can reheat it. It's one of those non-destructible Nathalie Dupree things. Okay, what I have right here is a beef tenderloin with a mock Italian sauce. And I just find that people are afraid of tenderloin, so I try to do it at least once every book and once every series. Here is a stripped beef tenderloin. It actually will serve 10 to 12. And this menu is for 8. But it makes a great presentation, and the leftovers are terrific. You can always do a lot with it, and of course you can use a cheaper piece of meat if you want to. But lots of times I find in the long run, although the whole thing is expensive, that, and I'm just pulling off little pieces here, have a great chef that's helping me in the back, Bernard, and he got those so that I could just pull off and show you exactly how it looked before, and then you would just cut it off with your knife. This is the chain that nestles right on here, and it just pulls right off. This is a 5-pound tenderloin of beef after it's been trimmed, which means it's about an 8-pound tenderloin of beef to start out with. Put it in a large, and I wanted to show you this. This is it before it's trimmed, and I do this on every show just so you can get a sense of how much fat there is. So when you're trying to figure out whether to buy trimmed or untrimmed, you have to figure that this fat is a gracious part of the overall dish, and therefore you need to be judicious about whether or not you think it's cheaper to buy it trimmed or untrimmed. You have to almost get a calculator. Now, take this trimmed piece of tenderloin and I put it in a large plastic bag, but you can put it in a bowl. Chop 4 garlic cloves and mix in, I'll just mix them into 1/3 cup of tomato juice and add 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and then right here I have 1/2 cup of red wine vinegar and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce and a tablespoon, I had some marjoram right here, packed marjoram. Oh, here they are. Here's all the rest. Let's see, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. What's in there? I've got brown sugar, and I've got oregano. There it is, or marjoram and oregano. 1/2 teaspoon of crushed. I can't see what all's up there. They've got it up there for me, but I can't read it. 1.5 teaspoons of fennel seed. You didn't think I memorized all this, did you? A teaspoon of crushed red peppers and a crumpled bay leaf. So there we are. Salt and pepper it to taste if you'd like. Just put it in there. Now put all of that in your plastic bag with your beef and seal it tightly, refrigerate it at least 2 hours or overnight. When you're ready to serve it, to cook it, remove it from the marinade, and let me just pull this over here and show you this, and flip the tail under to make the package of meat all about the same thickness, because you cook meat according to its thickness. And then tie it with some string. Here's some string. Just tie it around just to keep it uniform, and put the beef and the marinade in the serving dish. Doesn't it sound good? Oh, it smells good in this kitchen. It is just fabulous. So you put the whole thing here in the serving dish. And if you wanted to, you could do this with a cheaper piece of meat. You just would have to braise it more. And then roast it at about 400 degrees. Oh, anywhere, half an hour or so. You want to cook it half an hour, 20 minutes, just depending on the meat itself. Use an instant read thermometer and let it read 140 degrees for rare. Take it out and remove it and let it rest 10 minutes, and then thinly slice it and serve it with the pan juices. You just boil up the pan juices if you want to later. It's really marvelous. And now, about this important ingredient I use a great deal. The art of making flour has come a long way since the days when wheat was ground by water-driven wheels of stone. Today, the process is modernized, monitored, and computer-controlled. But here at White Lily Foods in Knoxville, Tennessee, making flour still has its roots in the tradition of Southern goodness. This process starts with a selection of soft, red winter wheat. It's best for making the kind of flour that goes into home-baked cakes and pastries, because a soft winter wheat flour needs less mixing and less shortening,
Since the wheat comes from different sources, it must be blended to overall standards for weight, protein, and other requirements. The wheat is tested before milling and drawn from different bins to form the proper blend. Wheat that does not pass muster for weight, protein, or if it has suffered insect damage, is rejected. Once the day's blend of wheat is chosen, it's tempered. That is, it's soaked in water for about 8 hours. Tempering softens the wheat and makes it easier to separate the hull, the wheat germ, and the bran from the part of the kernel that will become flour. Each 100 pounds of flour begins as 140 pounds of wheat. What's left over becomes mill feed and is sold to the animal feed industry. Once the byproducts are separated from the wheat, the process of grinding the wheat into flour begins. The wheat is ground and sifted and ground and sifted over and over again. Grinding, no longer done by wheels of stone, now is accomplished by rollers of metals that crush the wheat between them. The sifting is done through gradually finer silkscreens, and by the process of stream selection is fed into a stream for further grinding, or into the final blend of flour. The flour is tested all along the production line and at the end. Consistency is the watchword. Home bakers want a quality of flour they can count on again and again. Workers keep an eye on the flour's pH content, for example, because the pH, or acid-base balance, is an important factor in cake baking. The final test is in the oven for the flour's baking characteristics. From biscuits to cobbler, if the end result comes out light and fluffy, the flour wins the seal of approval.
For nearly a century, LeCreuset's colorful French cookware has been a favorite in kitchens around the world. From its bold finishes and uncompromised quality to its easy-to-clean materials, the brand's range of iconic products are as easy to use as they are to love.
I'm going to double my basic pie recipe that's in my books because I'm going to make this wonderful 2-crust pie. It's a raspberry mint pie. Now, I'm going to use a low-gluten flour with soft winter wheat flour, but you can substitute a combination of 1 part all-purpose flour to 1 part cake flour if you can't get winter wheat flour or soft wheat flour. It's not a big deal, and in fact, you can use the flour that you're normally used to if you'd like to as well. Now, you mix 2½ cups of flour and a teaspoon of salt, and I've got that all in here, in a large bowl. And then you're going to cut in 16 tablespoons of shortening with a pastry blender or a fork until the mixture resembles cornmeal. And so we've got this here. I'm just going to cut that in. Actually, it looks like it's less. It looks like that's about ½ cup. I'm going to just move some of this out. Maybe I didn't double it after all. I'm just not the woman I want to be. So here I am. Did you ever find that out yourself? So here we are. We've got our shortening, and we're going to go ahead and cut it into our pie crust with 2 forks, or you can just throw the whole thing in the food processor if you'd like. And the trick is to put a little more shortening into it than you use in a normal recipe, because if you have less shortening than what you need, it doesn't enable you to get as much water in as you want to and still keep the dough nice and moist. Now go ahead and add ice water. I kind of divide the mixture in thirds. Here's a third, a third, a third here. And so I'm going to add ice water a little at the time. And you just want enough to moisten the dough. So here's this. And take it and move it out when you think it's ready. See, what you're trying to do is to not work and overwork the whole dough, but just to get moist, because water develops gluten. Gluten is sort of the enemy of pie crust, although you like it for bread. It's what makes those strands in bread that you like, and what makes pie crust tough. And it's very closely related to the protein, and if I have a chance, I'm going to show you all the different flours that are available, not all of them obviously, but different flours that are available, and show you how to tell what kind of flour to buy. Briefly, what you do is you look at the side of a package and say, don't worry about that looking wet and gloppy there. That does not matter. I'm just going to pull this out here. And so what I've really got is just a single pie crust here for you. Now always work with a flour shaker, for me. Always work with a flour shaker and a pastry scraper. I'm just going to sprinkle that. I'm going to sprinkle my hands because I want to clean my hands off, because otherwise you complain. And rub them all off here. And shape it into a nice flat round. Now always work with a wet dough rather than a dry dough, because a dry dough sticks. And you flatten it and you wrap it in plastic wrap and chill it until you are ready for it. And the flatter you get it, the easier it will be to roll out, because when you bring it out to room temperature, it'll take less time. I'm just going to try to get all this off my hands and wipe them off here, although it doesn't really matter. I'm working with the dough. And go ahead now and get yourself a nice rolling pin. I like one that doesn't have the ridges on the end, you know, the things on the end, and I like a nice broad one. And start in the middle and roll forward, and start in the middle and roll back. Now it will be definitely much better to go ahead and chill this dough, and I have a rolled out one to actually bake, but I just wanted you to see the worst that would happen to you. You should try making it under hot lights and see. And you see, because I got more water in than I needed, and I didn't fool with trying to get the exact amount of water, and it's doing fine. Now I start in the middle and roll forward, and then I start in the middle and roll back, and then I turn it, and I turn it for two reasons. One is to try to keep it into a nice round shape, and the other reason is because I want it not to stick. I do have a pastry scraper here that I can use in case it does stick, but here we are. Nice. Here we go. And that, nice. And move this. Here we go. And you should always try to have a pastry brush too. Here's a nice pastry brush to brush off the extra flour before you do what I just did and gouge it, break it up a little. I think this is a new brush. And go ahead and move this right here. There we go. Now eyeball your pie crust and see whether or not it's going to fit it, and your pie pan. This is the bottom pan, and I have just taken my pie pastry and gently put it in there, and then pressed it around the sides. What you don't want to do is to stretch it in, because if you stretch it in, then what will happen to you is that it will bounce back later, or it would slip and fall. So if you want to move your pie crust once it's rolled, you fold it in half like that, and then you fold it in half like that, and just pick it up and walk around wherever you want to go with it. I'm going to put it on this piece of plastic wrap until I'm ready for it. Now I need to go ahead and show you how to fill this pie, and then I'll put the top on it. So let me get ahead to the recipe. Here I have some wonderful raspberries, for my cool mint raspberry pie. What you do is you heat your oven to 375 degrees, and then you chop some mint. It's really nice. And in a bowl, combine 2½ cups of sugar, 3 tablespoons, if you will, cornstarch, a ½ teaspoon of salt. You just put those all together, and you gently, I'm going to show you how to chop that mint, you just gently toss in 5 cups of raspberries. There we go. You don't want to break up those luscious raspberries any more than you have to, because there's nothing more delightful than getting a whole raspberry on your plate. Now add 2 heaping tablespoons full of the chopped mint, okay? And spoon that into the bottom of your unbaked pie shell. There's that. And here's this. Okay. Great, got it? Okay. Now, this is absolutely luscious, and I think that the mint brings out the raspberry in a wonderful way. Now I wish I had gotten that tossed a little bit better. I can see that I've got a little cornstarch on the side there, and if I don't get the cornstarch all the way through, it gets to be pretty soupy. Now you spoon that into the unbaked pie shell, and then you dot it with 2 tablespoons of butter. Don't leave that out. It makes all the difference. It just gives it a nice little touch there, nice little flavor. And so there you are with that. And now you moisten the pastry edge with water. Still, I'm going to show you how to chop this mint. I promise you. I'm going to chop some herbs in a minute anyway, so I may just take it over there with me and chop it all at one time, and my hands will look a little cleaner. Okay, now take your pie shell, and you want to move your top crust on the pie. And I think this is going to be just a little skimpy now that I see how full the filling is. So I'm going to unravel it, or else I think I've got one that's rolled out, that's a little bit bigger. I've got several here. Let's just see how I'm going to do with these. I want it to get on here and have just the right size. Now I've rolled these out between pieces of wax paper, which makes it much the easier way to do it. And take and put your top crust. Don't you wish you had 4 or 5 pie crusts that somebody had made for you that were just sitting there for you to casually pick up and say, well, now let's see, which pie crust shall I put on the top? It's one of the nice things about being a TV cook, that you've got somebody else doing it for you. And then you go ahead and pull it off the paper. Now, you think it's going to work after I brag that way? Probably not. Let's just see. Yeah, here we go. I'm just going to tear this right off the top here. Great. Now, don't worry. It's very hot in here today. And the camera lights sometimes get to be very hot. And so don't worry. I'll show you how to patch that up. And if that happens to you, don't worry about that either. You know, I must have told you that I once made my first pie crust on top of a going dishwasher. Now, this is probably the worst thing that would ever happen to you, right? Okay, that happens to you. Just go back, pull it off, and I'll show you how to save it, okay? Don't cry. That's always the temptation, but it solves nothing. And pie crusts can really make you miserable. Go ahead, pull this off. And of course, my pie crust recipes are always just a little bit generous for having extra crust. Take this out, just peel it off, and throw it into your food processor, which I just very cleverly have sitting up here so that I can show you how to do this. I'm going to throw this in here. And always save your scraps for just this kind of an emergency, because you're going to need just a little bit more extra scraps. Throw this in here, and in this case, I'll just add some scraps from this pie crust topping that I had right here, so that I'll know that I'll have more than enough. Now, I believe that the reason that that wouldn't unroll as well as being hot was that we just didn't have enough water in it. So let's go ahead and just add a smidgen of water. And probably added a little bit too much, but it doesn't matter, because what I have is more flour down there. And then go ahead and roll out your pie crust again. And it'll have a little pink glow to it, and just shrug it off. Just act like that's the way you intended it for it to be. So let's go ahead now, and I'm going to do this quick as a bunny and get this out and on top of my pie. And of course, it would be ideal if it could rest, so that gluten, that little devil, wouldn't get in there. Oh, it kind of looks pretty with this pink on it. May have developed a new recipe just for you, and that's how new recipes are born. Start in the middle, roll forward, start in the middle, roll back, pick it up, turn, pick it up and turn, pick it up and turn, turn, keep moving, keep moving. Keep moving. I wish you could see this one baked. Unfortunately, I've got another prettier one that's baking. Keep it going and look at it. It's fine, perfect. Pick it up, put it back on top, move it over on top of your pie, unroll the top. There we are. Now, how bad could that be? Now go ahead, take off this little extra, and you will pay attention to what you're doing and go all the way around the edge with water to press it. And go ahead now and take a little water, put it right here, and put that on top. Now, go around all the way around the edges and flute it. pushing 2 fingers together like that. You'll have time to go all the way around the edge. I wish I did, because it's going to work out. And then you go through and you cut off the edge to make it even. Now, if you've got something to cover up like that, just take yourself a little scrap of the pie and make a leaf out of it. And put that over there. And then do 2 or 3 more around the pie just to kind of hide it. That's all you need to do. Now you want to glaze it. Mix an egg white with a teaspoon of water and brush it on top. Bake it at 375 degrees for 40 to 50 minutes. You always want a hot oven for a pie because otherwise it'll slip and slide. You want that flour to set before the butter melts. Now, let me show you quickly these potatoes. I've spent enough time on the pie crust. Cut yourself some potatoes, or else use little small new red potatoes if you want to, about 1 1/2 inches big. Put them in cold water, bring them up to the boil, and boil them until they're done, an hour or so. Go ahead and drain them and put them in a colander, and then I'm going to make this wonderful dressing. You put 1/4 cup of fresh chopped parsley and 1/4 cup of chopped basil and 1/2 cup of chopped green onions right here in your bowl. You whisk together 3 heads of chopped garlic, 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard, a tablespoon of sugar, which I've already stuck in there, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, I could say it, a cup of olive oil, and 1/2 cup of red wine vinegar, which is already in there. You just whisk that all together. Now you pour that over the potatoes, but I'm going to pour the potatoes into the dressing here. You cover it and let it stand at least 4 hours or up to a week. And refrigerate it if you're keeping it more than a day. It is just terrific. I keep a big jar of them in my refrigerator, and I pick them out and eat them almost like snacks. You are just going to love them. They're absolutely delicious. And you can reheat them if you want to in the microwave or on top of the stove. I saved my pie. I just wish I could bake it for you. This menu is a natural for entertaining. It's impressive, it's tasty, and it's easily made ahead and presented. There are mussels, Julia, to start, followed by beef tenderloin with mock Italian sauce, charred peppers, and Italian herbed potatoes. And for dessert, there is this gorgeous, refreshing, cool raspberry mint pie. You're going to love this menu, and you're going to find that it will switch, and you'll love it for your family as well.